Right, welcome to the Cambridge Nationals, well, the theory bit, isn't it? R001, something like that. Anyway, the first video, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at different types of sort of computers that you can get in and around your home and around the office. And let's start off with this one. Quite frankly, we refer to this as what we call a desktop PC. And it's basically the sort of thing that most of you guys certainly have at school, maybe not so much at home nowadays. But let's have a look at really what I focus on here. What are the advantages and disadvantages of this particular type of machine? So let's start off with the advantages. Well, at the end of the day, at this moment in time, these computers tend to be the most powerful, and by powerful, what we mean is that they can have, more better levels of memory. And by memory, I particularly want to focus on the concept of RAM here. And the bottom line is, the more random access memory they have, it tends to mean that the computer is quicker and capable of carrying out things like doing gaming and stuff like that. And I guess your standard home computer now is probably going to come with something around about, I don't know, 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's, by the way, it's July 2012. So if you buy something from PC World, wherever it's going to be, chances are it'll come with about 4 gigabytes. You can get machines, you can build your own, and that's something we'll talk about in a moment as well. You can get up to 16 gigabytes if you wanted to. Particularly useful if you're doing something like photo editing, where you need or actually game playing, really, isn't it? Where you want a machine to be really rather quick. And also in terms of memory, that's the internal memory. What we also need to look at is, let's put the right hard disk here. It's quite normal now for machines to come with a terabyte of memory, and to make sure you know that, that's technically it's 1,024 gigabytes. Now that's very useful if you're storing things like lots of video. Basically, a whole video can take up maybe, I don't know, a whole film, maybe up 4 gigabytes of memory. So the more hard disk space you have, the more films and audio, as in songs, you can have on your computer as well. The other thing that comes along with, as well as having better memory, RAM, and more hard disk space, is that you can also have, I'll put it over here actually, hopefully I'm not run out of space, but you tend to find that you can get good processor speeds on these. And typically you'll find that a processor at the moment might come at something, I don't know, about 4 gigahertz, something like that is a pretty decent home machine. But you can get things like quad-core processors, and also you can put in things like graphics cards with fantastically powerful processors in them, which once again, it's really predominantly about gaming. If you're going to do gaming, you're better off having one of these machines, or an Xbox or a PS3, something like that. And I mentioned a moment ago, we can have better graphics processors. You can buy fantastic graphics processing cards to put an extra S in there, that you can put into your computers. And you can, if you want to play games, get yourself a desktop machine. You'll also notice that with a desktop machine, you actually have, I've got a white pen here, but let's look at this thing here, and that's the idea of the monitor. The monitor, you're not restricted. With a laptop, of course, you can't, well, you can set up another display, but why you would, I don't know. But we can have much larger sizes. Now, we've mentioned a moment ago that this is predominantly for gaming, but a very good example of where a desktop PC is the most useful thing is if you're doing something like architect's drawings and CAD/CAM drawings and things like that, because what they're going to want is a bigger display as possible, and they want to do 3D diagrams, they want to rotate and zoom around, etc. And the desktop machine is the right machine for that. So we've got lots of really good advantages, but of course there have to be some disadvantages to these sorts of machines as well. Well, of course they are. One, unlike with a laptop, these things are very much sit in a fixed position. It's not, you can, but it's not very usual for you to go, I want to do some work upstairs in my room, so I will unplug the entire computer from the lounge and then move it upstairs. So we don't have this concept of portability in there. They also tend to have, well, they basically have a larger footprint, or larger physical size. Yep, the larger physical size. That's what I want to put down here. In that, you know, these machines tend to be, well, they're a lot bigger, aren't they? If you can go for a nice big monitor and a lovely big fat tower with great big graphics processors and lots of memory, it's going to take up a larger physical. Sounds like I've been on the vodka, doesn't it? I haven't, trust me. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't start till 10, but they take up larger physical space, and also, you know, this whole thing really means that they're really just too heavy to carry, and that brings us on to this word portability, because these are not the most portable of devices. But at this moment in time, 2012, if you want to do some serious gaming or serious design work, then that's really the only option that you have. There are other sorts of computers, and of course what we've got here is we have the laptop, which I guess is what most people kind of have at this moment in time. I imagine at home, I've no idea, I've got no statistic to back this up. I imagine it's about 50-50. Some of you have got desktop machines at home, and I guess quite a lot of you have probably got laptops. And of course, again, we'll deal with advantage. I'll put ads here, is that they're smaller than a desktop PC, and of course they're lightweight as well, which basically leads to this concept of portability. You can move these things around no problem, can't you? You can take your laptop from your bedroom downstairs and carry on working. How do they connect to the internet? Well, those desktop machines would normally connect by using a cable, and these, I'm supposed to say wireless. Let's get the right way around. I can't spell. These are wireless, which means that you can basically connect to the internet from anywhere in your house as long as you're within range of the router that you've got. So the whole concept really is that, to summarize everything, we can probably put that in one word: they can be used anywhere, and that's the word we're looking for. But of course they have disadvantages as well, and really these are perhaps the flip side of what we're talking about, the advantages of the desktop PC. We've got a smaller screen. The screen that you're going to get, quite frankly, is of course fixed by the size of the laptop itself, and traditionally I guess we're looking at something like a 15-inch monitor on that one. Of course, if you've got a desktop machine, you can have as large a monitor as you like. Other things that you tend to find that the keyboard is smaller, so put smaller keyboard. That's what we want there. And of course there is no mouse. There is a mouse. We have this sort of trackpad here, don't we? But it's never quite the same as using a mouse, is it? It's a little bit harder to be quite accurate in what you're doing. When we talk, I'm going to put this word down, specification. And what I mean by specification is when we talk about the RAM and the hard disk, and of course the processor as well. Processor. And you tend to find that all three of these tend to be reduced compared to a desktop machine. These are not really machines that be using for doing graphics intensive work, well, like gaming and like sort of architect's drawings that we mentioned previously. Other flip side, compared to a desktop machine, even though they're less powerful, they do actually tend to be far more expensive. And as well as being expensive, they tend to be easy, this is one I always tend to put down, they tend to be easily stolen. We at our school tend to find that our laptops get a lot more readily broken, whether that be deliberate or accidental, than we tend to find with the desktop machines that we have. So that actually, if I was going to play one disadvantage of a laptop, I'd probably say it's going to be stolen, really. Moving on from the laptop, we have the netbook. And I think we can keep this slide quite short, really, because the advantages of the netbook are pretty much the same as they are for the laptop. So we'll just put advantages as laptop. They're the same sort of things, really. The disadvantages, you could turn around and say they're even more portable, but I say it was more portable. It's quite easy to pop one of those in your bag, really, isn't it? But the disadvantages tend to be that they have an even lower spec than you tend to find even on a laptop, and once again they tend to have tiny little keyboards, I must admit, over the years I've tried a few different devices, and the netbook is the one device that I've never really taken to. I just find it too small to do anything meaningful on. Sure, if you're just doing internet browsing or something like that, fine, they're okay. But I don't like them. You tend to find the screens also tend to be about 10 inches in size. I think 10.1 is normal, but about 10 inches in size. So they are quite small devices. Now, talking to something that's 10 inches in size, yeah, I know what you're thinking, but let's not go there. The 10.1 inches in size is, of course, the iPad. And what we refer to these as being is a tablet PC. Now, these tend to have the same sort of advantages really as with the laptop and the netbook, and it's all really about portability. But the one, and I've got an iPad here, not because I'm specifically pro Apple or anti Android or anything like that, just because the iPad is the most popular tablet out there. The big advantage of devices like this is they're so quick to load, because you just literally just put the power on, and once you put the power on, the machine is ready to use straight away. So they're very useful to use if you're going to use something sort of on ad hoc basis, or if the idea of speed of input, I think, is perhaps a better way of wording this. If you're looking at the speed of input, then they're really handy. You just flip it on, you go make a note, power it down again. Whereas if you're going to be using a laptop, or if you're going to be using a netbook, you're going to have to log on to the thing. So you maybe got a sort of 30-second to 1 minute wait, even with but with this, there's no wait at all. They are very, very useful in that things like, I don't know, for example, like the calendars can be synced and things like that, so that you can have several different devices and they can all work on the same calendar. But these really are, there's a big debate. A lot of schools are getting into them. Personally, I'm not really convinced by the idea they're that much use. My gut feeling is that these are really entertainment devices. And this is personal opinion, by the way. I wouldn't play this in an exam. They're really entertainment devices, and they're really used for sort of basically playing Angry Birds and browsing internet, browsing and Angry Birds, which, if it's 2012, Angry Birds on the way out, really. I think everyone had to cut the rope and things like that, and the logo quiz that they did. But of course, there are disadvantages, and that's what I'd like to focus a little bit of time on. These machines, even though they're quite quick to boot up, they are really quite low spec. And to be honest with you, compared to software that you install yourself, like Microsoft Office and things like that, software not as powerful. If you're going to be doing something like photo editing, yes, you can download apps. And apps, by the way, is a shortened word of the word applications, which we're going to put here, applications. You can get photo editing software, but you're never ever going to be able to reproduce the sort of the ability to do so much with a photograph that you can do with something like Microsoft Photoshop, whether that be installed on a netbook or a laptop or on a desktop machine. So I'm not really convinced that they're that strong. Also, when it comes to the iPad, I believe the largest size you can get is 64 gigabytes. So we're talking about videos, and the fact that a video is going to be high definition, about 4 gigabytes in size. That's the size, roughly the size of a DVD. Well, if they're 4 gigabytes in size for a film, you've only got 64 gigabytes storage, you can't really store an awful lot on these devices. There's one advantage that I did forget to put down, I should have really done, is that these things can actually connect to the internet using the mobile telephone signal of using a 3G or 4G connection. That's something that, well, I suppose you could with a laptop or a netbook use a wireless dongle. But it's built into these things. Final one I want to look at is a little chopped down version, really, of an iPad, and that's the smartphone. Of course, this has the advantage that it's really a phone and a computer in its own right. But of course, advantage once again, oh, we should really put the word ads there. Ads, 3G, 4G, and Wi-Fi. Of course, I didn't mention that in the last one, but it doesn't really make any difference, to be honest with you. Laptops, netbooks, tablets, and smartphones can all connect to the internet via Wi-Fi. But when it comes to, again, you could argue that it's quick loading if you want to get to a particular app or particular program. But of course, the smartphone is never really going to be a tool that you're going to be using to create anything perhaps that meaningful, because the major disadvantages is that the size. You couldn't do any graphics editing on a screen that's sort of about 4 or 5 inches tops in size, and also you couldn't do any graphics editing because going back to this idea of limited specification, the idea that you're going to have, they don't really have great processors or a lot of memory in them or anything like that. You can put little SD cards in there. Maybe you can expand the memory with an SD card, which I suppose could be an advantage. But those SD cards at this moment in time, that's supposed to be a 6 there. Once again, there's a 64 gigabyte, and you'll also argue that they're expensive. Because you pick up a Samsung Galaxy 3, which is the picture I believe of that device there, or an iPhone, you're looking at, for a modern top of the range one, you're looking at maybe £400, and you can build yourself a hell of a desktop computer for that sort of money. The other thing is about smartphones, and this is something we're going to look at a lot in subsequent videos. Operating systems. You've got iOS, which is the Apple one. You've got Android, which is they're the two main players at this moment in time. But we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. Different operating systems, especially when you look at a country like China, and they're developing their own operating systems for their smartphones. Perhaps we don't really know what's going to happen long term with the operating system that we used on the smartphones of the future. I think, to be honest with you, that's kind of it. So, a quick recap: we've got the smartphone, and we've got the tablet PC. Again, quick loading, that sort of thing. You've got the netbook, which I'm not really convinced is useful for pretty much anything apart from sort of browsing the internet. And if I had money to buy a netbook, I would personally go out and buy a second-hand tablet. You've got the laptop, which of course is perhaps the most useful device if you're looking in terms of portability and actually doing something meaningful, like with Microsoft Office or something like that. But of course, at this moment in time, my gut feeling is we're still in 2012 looking at the major computer for doing meaningful work is going to be the desktop PC. Hopefully you guys now understand the differences, the advantages and disadvantages of those 5 types of machines.